Let's speak to Aaron David Miller, a former State Department advisor and negotiator in the Republican and Democratic administrations. Thank you for joining us live now from Washington, D.C. So as we heard there from Alan, promoting democracy and human rights, maintaining strong alliances and even using negotiation, these are the historic constants of U.S. diplomacy. But the question is, are we witnessing a dramatic shift in these constants in Trump's second term? Mr. Aaron David Miller, are you able to hear me at all?
I can hear you.
Okay, I had already asked you a question. I'm not sure you heard me, but I'll ask it again. Promoting democracy, human rights, maintaining strong alliances, negotiations. Now, these are all the historic constants of U.S. diplomacy. And my question to you was, are we witnessing a dramatic shift in these constants in Donald Trump's second term, do you think?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not sure that promoting human rights and democracy is a constant. I mean, it's certainly, I worked in every administration from Jimmy Carter to Bush 43. On that issue, U.S. adherence to international law, promotion of democracy, human rights has been extremely uneven. And I think that needs to be noted. The only thing I would say with respect to, we'll get to the issue of negotiations in a minute, is on the issue of alliances. I mean, I have to admit what I'm struck by, having worked for Democrats and Republicans, is despite all of the criticism of American foreign policy under Trump, and there is much to be criticized, what is so stunning to me, so absolutely extraordinary, is the degree to which the rest of the world, I mean, where do you want to start? Africa, Latin America, Middle East in particular, Europe, all of these leaders, or many of them, have been stumbling all over one another in order to get to Washington to meet him, either because they're afraid of him or they want something from him. I find it just remarkable, given the fact that on so many other issues, he has overturned conventional and traditional ways of doing business. Someone said to me the other day, well, hasn't the U.S. lost influence? And I could only say, and again, I voted for Republicans and Democrats and worked for them. I'm no fan of Donald Trump and what he's doing to our democracy and the norms and institutions of effective governance in the United States. But I have to say, I'm just amazed that very few leaders, let's talk about the Middle East, have imposed any costs or consequences or sought to distance themselves from Donald Trump. I can't think of one Middle Eastern leader, from Benjamin Netanyahu to Mohammed bin Salman to Abdel Fattah Sisi. I mean, the list goes on and on. Erdogan is Turkish, Muslim, not Arab, but I find it remarkable. So I think that's something that needs to be put into the analytical machine and thought about, because it's hard for me to explain why, for example, no Middle Eastern leader watching what the Israelis have done in Gaza over the course of the last several years,
right, and
either Israel's treaty partners or the Abraham Accord countries have sought to impose a single cost or consequence on Israel or the United States,
and that brings
let alone the European.
Mr. Miller, and that brings me to my question. I mean, Donald Trump is proud of being the deal maker, adopting a peace through strength approach. As we're talking to you, we're seeing some of those pictures in Sharm el-Sheikh back in October, as you mentioned, Donald Trump and the leaders. But do you think Trump's peace deals in Gaza and Iran, for example, are they sustainable in the long run?
First of all, they're not. There are no peace deals. With Iran, you had a circumstantial end to the conflict after 12 days of an Iranian-Israeli war and 3 strikes by the United States against Iran's enrichment facilities. you had circumstances that produced, at least for the moment, the end of conflict there. But by no means has there been any diplomatic engagement between the U.S. and Iran since June 12th, and the 5 rounds subsequently proved to be fruitless. As far as Gaza is concerned, phase 1 has been implemented. 20 living hostages, asymmetrical number of Palestinian prisoners. The end of the war that we watched on October 7th, that war is over. But as we know, several hundred Palestinians more have been killed, including Hamas fighters, since the ceasefire was declared. And getting to phase 2, I think, is going to be an extraordinarily heavy lift. You know, Julius Caesar said that Gaul was divided into 3 parts. Well, Gaza is now divided into 2 parts. And I would argue to you that it's going to be extremely difficult in 2026
and
to fundamentally alter that reality.
And where does that leave Trump when it comes to his strategy for Venezuela? Because he has had an extrajudicial battle, if you like, with alleged drug traffickers. Of course, that's been in the Caribbean. And he's also signed more executive orders and compared to his first term. Even if you compare it to his Democratic predecessors, Biden and Obama. So does it entail a kind of threat to U.S. constitutional values? But also, what's his game plan, if you like, when it comes to Venezuela?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that you're witnessing the greatest aggrandizement of presidential power in American history. You could argue Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Before him, Andrew Jackson played around with the National Bank. Richard Nixon refused to turn over the Watergate tapes. But under all those circumstances, Congress and the courts were able to push back in a way to contain that aggrandizement of presidential power. I mean, there have been 358 lawsuits, 140 of them the courts have essentially stayed. But you're witnessing an undermining of American norms and institutions unprecedented in American history, which in my judgment is the most worrisome thing that the administration has done. As far as Venezuela is concerned, if you look at the national security strategy paper that the administration put out, they have made the Western Hemisphere basically an American lake. They've expanded the concept of the Monroe Doctrine, and Venezuela is the poster child for this. Trump administration's objectives here, clearly he's into a mano-a-mano contest with Maduro, and he wants to see the back of him. He's interested in opening up, or at least controlling, or at least facilitating American business and oil company interests in Venezuela without constraint. The drug trade is, to me, not key here because Venezuela is neither a source of cocaine or fentanyl. Most of those drugs that are killing Americans, roughly 75,000 a year, come across the land border. And are largely coming out of Mexico. So how Venezuela is going to end is unclear. But I think Trump has left himself absolutely no space for any other outcome than to force Maduro from power. If he fails to do so, given the fact they've deployed a carrier strike group, they've blown up 29 speedboats and killed 100.
Right.
Imposed sanctions. It's going to be extremely difficult. It'll be a major blow to Trump's credibility, and it will undermine American interests as well. He's carried a big stick, and he's spoken softly unless he finds a way to get rid of Maduro.
It's certainly been a very interesting last year. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us, Mr. Aaron David Miller, a former State Department advisor and a negotiator in Republican and Democratic administrations. Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.